What's up guys, it's Naf here. So it's been a little over 3 months now since I uploaded my finally attempting Araxxi video, getting my first 10 kills at Araxxi, and since then I've been trying to kill the boss as consistently as possible. Although in saying that, I did go a whole month without killing her at all, just due to being busy and honestly pretty unmotivated to do it. But regardless, even with that in mind, it's still taken roughly 2 months of killing Araxxi daily to manage to get some loot worth talking about. So for those who are not aware, Araxxi's loot system is pretty confusing. Essentially, there are 3 different leg piece drops, which are all required to make the spider leg, which are then added to a hilt to make a completed weapon. The hilt can either be an eye, fang, or web, which dictates the combat style it's used for, and the drop chances of the hilt are based on what combat style Araxxi is, which if you're an Iron Man making your own instance will always be whatever is weak to your combat style. So for myself, I did nearly all of my kills with a Dragon Rider Lance, which meant I was fighting the ranged Araxxi, and in the instance if I rolled a hilt on the loot table, it had a 50% increased chance of being the web hilt, and the spider legs on the other hand are 100% based on the path you choose, meaning once you've chosen one of the 3 paths, then you will only be able to get that one specific leg piece based on that path you chose. So really all this means is there's even more RNG involved when completing a weapon here in comparison to other bosses. So anyway, getting on with my experience, after 5 kills I did manage my first drop, which was a great start, as it was the spider leg top, which comes from the minion path, which most people would agree has the most annoying and dangerous mechanics of the 3. Next drop wasn't until kill number 79, where on the darkness path, I managed the leg bottom piece, so technically halfway to having a completed weapon. Next, only 3 kills later, on kill number 82, I managed my first hilt, which was the web hilt, so this was always going to be the most likely since I'm using melee, which I'm actually quite fine with, considering I do plan on doing next in the near future, where this bow will be extremely effective. Next drop wasn't until kill number 158, where I did manage another leg piece, but it was on the minion path yet again, and I did manage my second top leg piece. Now from memory, the block path was the acid path, which gave the middle piece I needed, which ultimately meant for that period of time I couldn't possibly complete a weapon, which can be annoying if you want to get a specific leg piece. But nevertheless, in these situations, I was still killing Araxxi for her general loot and the chance at other hilts, and naturally, duplicate leg pieces will still help make all 3 weapons in the future. Next drop, 229 kills in, I did manage another leg piece, but it was another duplicate of the leg piece gotten from the darkness path, the bottom leg piece. So similar to the last drop, acid path was blocked, but it did mean I was halfway to making a second weapon. Next drop, 271 kills in, I did manage another drop, which was a hilt, but unfortunately it was another web hilt, which really doesn't have any use outside of being able to make a second Noxious bow, which I can disassemble for Noxious components, which is required for some of the best DPS gizmo perks in the game. But in saying that, I don't see myself doing enough Araxxi to complete all 3 weapons, plus additional ones for the sake of components. So for the time being, I see the duplicate hilts as a bit of a waste, and for the remaining kills I actually switched to ranging with my shadow glaives. Next drop wasn't actually Araxxi specific, but at kill number 279 I did get the defense pet Wallace, which I am happy about because I do want at least 3 combat pets by the time I max, so I can learn them and get the Jack of Blades broadcast, along with the others whilst I max in. And funnily enough, I wasn't using the glaives for long, because at kill number 281 I did manage a drop, which was the middle leg piece, the final piece I needed to complete my first weapon from Araxxi, the Noxious longbow. So taking a look at the overall loot. Now unlike all my other loot videos, I don't actually have everything I got from Araxxi. So I have tallied all the loot based on every kill which I recorded, and you have to take my word for it. Obviously I would have much preferred to have everything in my inventory, but due to this loot being collected over the course of 3 months, a lot of the consumables and some of the raw materials were used along the way. So first up, the unique drops, which you mainly did just see, along with those though, were the Araxxi arrows, which is used for the bow, so more or less enough to last for a very long time, and also the Araxxi pheromones. So these are a consumable with the main use of resetting Araxxi's daily enrage, which for those who aren't familiar with the enrage system, essentially every time you kill Araxxi in a day, her damage is increased by 20%, and this increases every successful kill until a cap of 300%. So essentially this consumable item allows you to farm Araxxi without being penalized by the enrage system as much, which I do plan on using at some point when the easiest path combination is available, Acid, Pull, and Darkness. And next we have the general loot, which mainly consists of alchable items or high level materials. So because it is a lot of items, I will split it up into 3 categories, essentially being the best drops, the average drops, and the worst drops from my perspective. So first taking a look at the best items and the amounts of those that I got. So in terms of the flasks, it's hard to complain about getting easy Saradome and Brews, Super Restores and Overloads in decent quantities and also in flasks, although the amount of Super Restores gotten at a time is substantially less than the Brews, which isn't ideal, but regardless they're still very valuable. Next is the Onyx Bolt E's, simply because they have a decent high alchemy value for the amount you get at a time, getting anything from around 900k to 2.2 million GP in high alchemy value at a time. Next is the similar uncut onyxes, so these are always useful for recharging items such as Reaper necklaces or Amulet of Souls, and will always be needed, and also these are quite hard to get a hold of elsewhere. Next is the Ceramic Scales. Now these aren't too hard to get in small quantities over time if you're doing things such as Slayer, but considering you need 84 to make a full Ceramic armor set, which is something I would certainly like to do at some point, it definitely makes a big difference being able to get 2 or 3 at a time. Next is Magic Seeds. Obviously this is where it starts getting pretty subjective because I personally hate farming, so to get Magic Seeds in bulks of 5 to 8 is really useful as it equivalates to about 70 to 110,000 farming experience at a time, as long as none of them die. And lastly, Runite Ore, so again this is really just to my preference, as smithing is one of the few production skills I have left to complete, and the fact it also makes items which can high alchemy for gold also adds to the benefits of this drop. Next up we have the average drops, and obviously the amounts of them I got. So first we have coins dropping between about 400 to 450k at a time, although it isn't as high as some of the alchables, it is easy gold requiring no high alchemy. Adamant ore, so in terms of the raw materials, it is all just about my preference, but adamant does give decent experience and will eventually be an item which I can either disassemble or high alchemy. Magic and U logs, so I still need to work on my fletching, and I was a noob who AFK trained woodcutting mainly through ivies and crystal trees, so anything to help towards fletching is always welcome, and they will end up being disassembled or high alchemied for gold as well. Next we have the Grimy Lancerdyme, Avanto and Dwarf Weed, so these will always have value even after 99 herb lore because potions are practically needed anywhere remotely high level, and considering I hate herb farming, there's no such thing as too many herb drops. So although Araxxi drops a few other items with comparable high alchemy values, these drop in low quantities with high alchemy values per item, meaning you at least can high alchemy them and move on pretty quickly. Okay, and for the final lot of main loot, which for me personally was the least beneficial loot, starting with the Battle Staves. So these drop in decent amounts with their high alchemy values ranging from 350 to 490k depending on the amount. Next is Hydrix Bolt Tips. So these always drop in lots of 40, which in terms of high alchemy value is 240k gold, which is simply less than everything else before it. In saying that, I have no idea whether these are actually useful when put onto Ascension bolts, so maybe I'm being ignorant, but in terms of their gold value, for an Ironman, they're on the low end. Next we have Black Dragon Hide. So for myself, and I'm sure many other Ironmen, I did most of my crafting at harps, so I don't need the experience and don't plan on turning it into items for high alchemy gold just because of the effort required to tan it all. Next we have coal, so coal drops in large amounts from many places, especially God Wars Dungeon 2, which I've personally done more than enough of, so coal to me is pretty worthless at this point. Next is Rocktails. Now you'd think Rocktails would be up the top because high level food equals high level bossing, which is obviously ideal. But my issue with these is they drop in very low quantities, even less than Saradome and Brew Flasks, which is confusing in itself because of how easy it is to get a Rocktail in comparison to 6 doses of Saradome and Brew and a flask. So for that reason, I see getting 8 to 11 Rocktails from an Araxxi kill as one of the worst drops in comparison to the alternatives that are available. And next we have Water Talismans. Now if I still needed to level summoning, these would be great, but I don't, and Geyser Titans are equally never needed, so these are close to worthless for me in my current position. And lastly, one of the most lackluster drops from Araxxi is the Triskelion Key Fragments. My issue with them is the fact that you need 3 to even make a completed key and to get loot, and even the potential loot from a Triskelion Key is pretty bad in general. So that was it for all the drops I got from 281 Araxxi kills, and just to clarify, the way I evaluated the drops was just on my own preferences based on my Ironman specifically, not grand exchange value or the rarity in comparison to other sources of bossing. But anyway, now I do want to make my Noxious longbow, as it has been a long time coming and it will be my first tier 90 weapon, which is exciting. So there we go, I'm hoping this thing will take me a long way, helping me to continue killing Araxxi, and also next once I have maxed. And for those who may be wondering, I'm not going to be using my Barrows die on the bow, just because personally I really like how it looks on the Noxious Staff and Scythe, so I'll be using it on one of those once I manage to get them. But that's pretty much it for this one. I am still grinding away on skills towards maxing, so expect a video about that early next week hopefully. And if you have any questions about Araxxi, I'm definitely not an expert, but more than happy to field any questions you may have, so feel free to leave them in the comments. But that's it for me, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.